Hey, good Thursday morning. Yeah, Thursday morning. So today I want to talk about water. Yeah, water. H2O. Yeah, everybody, I mean, right now you probably have a cup of coffee in front of you and you used water to make it, right? Or maybe a hot tea or hot chocolate. You had to use water to make it, right? And you probably if you whatever breakfast food you had, you probably had to use some type of water, whether it was oatmeal or maybe you use milk, I don't know. But you had to use water when you brush your teeth. Some people use water whenever they um, take a shower. A lot of people take showers in the mornings before they leave their house. Water is essential. Firefighters, water is essential. You know how essential water is. That is truly, especially when you hit a hydrant and that water source better be available because it's a matter of life or death. Well, in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 47, Ezekiel is given a vision of the temple of God. And verse 1, it says, the man brought me back to the entrance to the temple, and I saw water coming out from under the threshold of the temple toward the east. The water was coming down from under the south side of the temple, south of the altar. And so Ezekiel's given this vision of this water flowing from the temple. And so what does this water signify? What does it represent? And what does it mean for us? Because later on in verse 5, it talks about the man measuring off another 1,000. And, again, he was measuring the water distance. And Ezekiel was watching as this man measured from one distance to another distance. And in verse 5, it says, but now it was a river that I could not cross because the water had risen and was deep enough to swim in, a river that no one could cross. And the man asked me, Son of man, do you see this? And so Ezekiel was given this glimpse of what this water does. This, and to me, I think this equates to what Jesus said in John chapter 4, verse 10. When the woman, he met the woman at the well. Some of you remember that story. Some of you were at Jacob's well before. But at that well, Jesus initially asked that woman for water, but then in verse 10, he's like, if you knew the one asking you for water, you would be asking him for water, because what he can give you is living water, And so in Ezekiel 47, Ezekiel's given this vision, and this water, when it is flowing from the temple of God, it starts out small, but by the time you get to verse 5, it's a river that no one could cross, and it was deep enough to swim in. And then this person asked Ezekiel, do you see this? He led me back to the bank of the river. When I arrived there, I saw a great number of trees on each side of the river. And he said to me, this water flows toward the eastern region, goes down into the Arabah, where it enters the Dead Sea. Some of you watching this, you have been to the Dead Sea. You floated in the Dead Sea. You put some of that gunky stuff that's on the bottom of the Dead Sea, you put it on your face and you rubbed it all over your body. And the oily and the greasy stuff. And the salt content is so thick in that Dead Sea that you float. When you enter the water, you enter backwards and then you sit down in it and then you lay back because the salt content is so thick. And Ezekiel's given a vision of water flowing from the temple of God, entering the Dead Sea. And it says that the salty water there becomes fresh. Do you see what the water that flows from the temple can do? It can make, and the Dead Sea is located at the lowest point on earth, And yet the water from the temple flows, enters the Dead Sea, and makes the water fresh. And listen to what happens next. Swarms of living creatures will live wherever the river flows. Swarms of living creatures will live wherever the river flows. Jesus told that woman at the well that he offered her living water. And when you look at Revelation chapter 21, it's almost a glimpse of Ezekiel 47. Just John has a different vision than what Ezekiel has. But in Revelation chapter 22, it's the river of the water of life. And in Revelation chapter 21, verse 6, it says, I will give water as a gift to the thirsty from the spring of life, from the spring of life. And when you look at this passage of Scripture and you think about how important water is to all of us for survival, Jesus offered the woman at the well living water. And Ezekiel's given a vision of living water flowing from the temple of God. And that water enters the Dead Sea, makes everything fresh. And swarms of living creatures will live there. Why? Because the water from the temple of God brings life. It does. It brings life. And it says there will be large numbers of fish because this water flows there and makes the salt water fresh. So where the river flows, everything will live. Where the river flows, everything will live. And that's a promise. That's a promise. And the example of that is when Jesus encountered that woman at the well, and he told her that he would offer her living water. Just think about that. And she doesn't accept it, but she has a conversation with him. And in the midst of the conversation, she doesn't realize that she has received living water. And she realizes that Jesus is the Messiah of God. And what does she do? She runs back to the village. She has a new identity. She's not that person that everybody gossiped about. She's not the one that had the reputation. She's not the one who's the downcast or the outcast of society. She's not the one that everybody was pointing fingers at anymore. She was redeemed by living water at the well. And what does she do? She runs back to the village where everybody talked about her, everybody gossiped about her, everybody pointed fingers and used her as the town gossip. She runs back to that village, offering them living water. And what do? They come running out to where Jesus is. And a miracle happens because living water flows. And that's what Jesus promised. That's what Ezekiel chapter 47 shows. It says, where the river flows, everything will live. And I think in America and around the world, we have a drought. We do. We have a drought. Why do we see so much crime? Why do we see so much hate? Why do we see so much negativity? Why do we see people just tearing each other down? Because we have a drought. The living water hasn't been flowing. We may have churches in every community across this country, but let me tell you something, that living water, someone turned the water off. Somebody turned that faucet off. And it's time for us as the people of God to be the people of God. Don't worship a president. Don't worship a senator. Don't worship a politician. Don't worship a reality star. Worship Jesus and let that living water flow. And when that living water flows, you know what? It's going to trickle into your social media. When that living water flows, it's going to come out of your mouth with the words that you share and the way you treat people and the way you love one another. Yeah, Ezekiel said that where the river flows, everything will live. And friends, we need living water in our world today. And that living water flows from the throne of God. And I pray that you open your heart, let that water flow, and let's use it to fight the drought that we have in our world. Yeah. Where that river flows, everything will live. That's a promise. Hey, this is Pastor Bill from St. Luke's United Methodist Church, Harrisville, West Virginia, Ritchie County, West Virginia, wherever you are. I hope you're happy, I hope you're healthy, and I hope you're safe. Pray for one another and share living water. Yeah. At work, at school, in your community. There's a drought out there. And wherever that river flows, yeah, that's what it says. Everything will live. Have a great day, and God bless.